Mr. Mayor, thank you for being here this
morning.
morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
How's the job? Piece of cake, right?
This is the best job there is in the country.
You were telling me long hours. Did you expect it to be this? There's been a lot of controversy lately. There's been a lot going on in this city. Did it meet your expectations as far as how difficult it would be?
You know, this is a city that's in an incredible period of change and a country that's in a period of change. And the thing I love about this city is I literally am out every week in parts of the city. I probably am more parts of the city than anyone who lives here. You know, I've done town halls in Ballard, West Seattle, Capitol Hill. I'm doing roundtables with people experiencing homelessness. This morning I met with the navigation team. I am in and around all parts of the city. And there's a lot of challenges we have right now as a city. People are feeling anxious about a number of things. And my job as mayor is to listen, to learn, and then to act so that we can move forward as a city together to be a better city.
So I was telling you in the green room, I've been harassing your staff off camera to try to get you in. So we're glad that you're in because there's a lot of things we want to talk to you about. You're going to make a big announcement at noon. You were gracious enough to invite some members of the press to do a briefing on the announcement related to homelessness. The plan is to take at least 500 additional people off the streets, get them into some kind of shelter. How big of a difference do you think this plan will make?
I think this is one part of a bigger plan, and I think it'll make a significant difference. We need to do everything. We need to have a better prevention strategy, and we've done that through rental vouchers. And we're working on more things to keep people from falling into homelessness and to divert people from the shelter system. We also have to build more affordable housing as quickly as we can, and not just for low income, but for middle class, so people can stay and live in Seattle. This part of the plan is geared at we need and we know we need to get people out of cars, out of tents, and off the streets into safer places so that we can give them the services they need. This will be the largest expansion of shelter space in the city ever since we've been dealing with this homeless issue. So we will be able to see a noticeable difference, and more people, more than 500 people in the next 60 to 90 days will be moved from the streets and our parks and all throughout the city to safer places where we can actually get the services they need to get them into that long-term housing.
Obviously, everybody should want to remove homeless individuals from the streets and get them into a place where they have better access to services, where it's safer. I think we just had a map up. Can you guys put that map back up? So this map is going to show places where you're either going to be expanding pre-existing shelter services or we're going to be creating new ones. There are 2 tiny house villages that would potentially be a part of this, one at South Lake Union, one at 18th in Yesler. There's going to be community concern. I mean, I know you have people who are like, we want the homeless people out of the unsanctioned camps. But on the other hand, they're like, we're concerned about sanctioned camps like tiny house villages. So what level of public input is there going to be in places like South Lake Union where you want to put a new tiny house village?
We're going to have a lot of community engagement. And we've seen throughout the city that people always have concerns when there's change in their neighborhoods and communities, whether it's a homeless tiny house village coming, whether it's a change in zoning. And so you have to listen and talk to people. And if you looked at what happened, for example, in Inner Bay and Ballard, huge amount of community resistance at first to 2 of the tiny home villages were there. But once they had the experience and saw how it functioned and how it could really help people, they were supportive at the renewal and actually helped in the moving of that and building of that in the community. We've seen that at Whittier Heights too, where we're putting in a tiny house village. We've had people from the community and from all over Seattle come to help build the tiny home villages, to volunteer, to make sure that they get integrated in the community. We've also had experiences where it hasn't worked well, and we've got to listen to community and make sure we as a city do a better job. I will tell you, Brandy, and it is the absolute truth, I have been in every part of Seattle. I have never run into a person yet that doesn't want to help, that doesn't want to make sure that people experiencing homelessness have a safer place to live and that we get more affordable housing. What people are looking for is action and a plan, and we want to show that we can make a difference in this city. So we will be moving forward in the next 60 to 90 days with council approval to move more people off the streets. At the same time, I am continuing to work with the county executive and Mayor Bacchus to get a regional solution so Seattle doesn't have to foot the bill and do all of this by themselves, and we handle this as a regional problem and challenge. And I'm going to continue to push on every front, because this is a really complicated issue that requires action by everybody.
Yeah, it's complex. It is regional. This is not a Seattle issue, but Seattle in a lot of ways contributes to what the rest of the region is facing, especially when it comes to affordability. You mentioned something that's critical. You said people want to help, but people want a plan. And that has been the primary thing that we've heard. And I have this nice PowerPoint that your staff gave me during this briefing yesterday. And I was sitting there and I told you this yesterday. I said, this is what people have been asking for. They've been asking for a strategy. They've been asking for a plan. So why not come up with something like this, present it, get it passed, show that it works, and then ask for money, and then pass something like the head tax? Why are we doing it backwards?
We are doing this plan. And a head tax was passed. We'll see if we get those revenues or whether it's recalled or not. I can't wait as mayor, and no one wants us to wait. They want action today, and they're going to move forward. We've been in the process of doing this, as you can see. You obviously can't create this kind of strategy overnight. So we formed an interdepartment cabinet. We've talked with people throughout Seattle and community to come up with a plan that actually could move people off the street into safer places and build it out. We also know that the people of the city, they want to see that there can be a difference. That's our job as city government. And it's not just in the homelessness sphere. It's in our transportation system. And it's in everything we do as government. And I've been working really hard since becoming mayor to go department by department, see what's working, see what's not working, listen to people, and say, how do we get better? Because people work really hard. They give us their tax dollars and their energies and their thoughts. We're going to take that and build together to be a better city. We've got great challenges, but we have the best people anywhere, I think, to handle those challenges.
You are not blind to the controversy the head tax created. I know that. We've seen protests. We've seen efforts to recall that, to send it to the ballot. Given the anger that we've seen, I'm sure you've also heard feedback behind the scenes, if voters get a chance to say yes or no to that head tax, do you think that Seattle will still have a head tax after those votes are counted?
I think it's a long time between here and November, and I think rather than predicting what's going to happen in a vote, my job as mayor is to work every day to make a difference. I'm not waiting till November to decide how we act or whether we act. We're going to start, and we're going to start by moving as many people as we can off the street. We're also looking at a range of things, as you know, we talked about yesterday, is right now our permanent supporting housing that we build is expensive and takes time. It can take over 2 years to construct a new facility that's great housing, but now costs have gone up so much in Seattle, it can be as much as $250,000 to $300,000 a unit. That's not
Which is insane.
It's not sustainable. But you look at Canada, and they have pioneered some modular housing that they can bring in for under 100,000 Canadian, so about 80,000 a unit, and it can go up in 90 days. We have to change how we do business. We're going to be doing things like master leasing whole buildings, looking at buildings that are not being utilized now and using them to shelter people. One of the buildings that we're going to be using in the next 90 days is a building in Belltown that Plymouth Housing is going to be used for long-term supportive housing. But it would be sitting there empty for 2 years. Why should we have it sit empty? Let's use it today to help solve the problem. And we're going to do that throughout the city.
Yeah, you definitely came up with some creative solutions. And I think my reaction was, and it's not your fault, but is, why didn't we do it sooner? Why did we have these resources sitting around for years? Or why didn't we take an approach where we looked at where can we put people? I know you've been on the job for like 5 months, so I'll blame previous mayors for that and for, you know, the extent of the crisis that we're in. Here's what I'll tell you before we move on to the next subject. You have a few months before this head tax goes to a vote, potentially. I think they'll get enough signatures. Please use that time to prove to us that that money will be used well if voters don't overturn it. Everyone wants you to be successful when it comes to dealing with the homeless crisis. So that's what I would ask, is please use that time to prove to us and the people who will go to make a vote that if they keep that money and that funding, that you're going to use it well.
I think that's great advice, and I think we have to do it not just in homelessness, but we have to reprove ourselves in every program we do.
I agree.
You know,
Yeah.
And it's not just here in Seattle. You know, nationally right now, there's a low time for people's trust in government. Mm-hmm. And we have to show we can be different. You look, yesterday I spent over an hour meeting with the head of the Seattle Department of Transportation. it's been a department that has had significant challenges with projects with significant challenge.
People get angry at them a lot too.
They can, and we can either put our fingers in our ears and say, no, 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 or we can look at it and say, how do we fix it? How do we tell people, here's the money we have, here's what we can get done, and here's what our goals are, and then measure us by it.
It's the job of city government. That should be your baseline job to be successful, but to also prove to us that you're doing all of these things that you promise. We have that expectation across the board, not just your office, when it comes to traffic solutions, all of that. I need to move on quickly. There's been a controversy, yet another one, brewing in City Hall, the police chief search. Carmen Best, the interim police chief, was not named as one of the 3 finalists. I was in the press conference where that happened. There was nothing short of outrage after the fact. You appointed Carmen Best to that interim position. I want to ask you a blunt question. Did you have anything to do directly with her not making the list of the final 3?
No, because, and I want to be really clear with people, because I think people don't understand what process was used, because there's been a lot of statements about this happened, that happened. So we had the most inclusive search process that the city's ever had. We had dozens of community meetings. We had a search committee that whittled down from dozens and dozens of candidates to interview a smaller amount to present 5 to the interim group. So that process also, you know, they used a process, and one could say, how do we know they used the right process to even get to the 5?
How do you know they're the right people? These are 5 people.
And you look at it because I trust the people who were in that search committee. They were a broad-based group from Seattle representing all sorts of interests. So they did a tremendous job. The next step, under the city charter, it requires me as mayor to select from 3 people who passed the competitive examination or rated the highest. So you have the search committee that comes up with 5 names. Those 5 names then have to be reduced to 3 under the charter in a competitive examination. That competitive examination was not an insiders group, as some people think it is. I carefully made sure that we had a very cross-section of people and experience. First, in the search committee, the co-chairs we had Tim Burgess, former member of the council, former police officer, who some would say is the moderate wing, but who was at the start working with me as U.S. Attorney on police reform. We would not have had police reform without him. Sitting next to him was Jeff Robinson, one of the foremost experts on race and systemic racism in the country.
Well, we could sit here and talk about the cross-section of who was all on the search
committee.
But
no, I think it's important for people to understand, if you want to look at a system to see it's fair, who was making those decisions? Sue Rohr, the 3rd co-chair, who knows more about policing and was the first woman ever elected.
But you can't deny there are people on the search committee who are not pleased.
No, I know, but I think the public. Right. I think the public needs to, let me finish, please, if I can. The public needs to understand, first, who those co-chairs were and how diverse they were. So you had a woman who was the first elected sheriff ever in the Northwest, who came up the ranks as a woman, knowing how hard it is. Yeah. You had the #1 criminal defense lawyer, perhaps in the country, and an expert on systemic racism. You had Tim Burgess, who understands Seattle, and Colleen Echohawk, who works with probably the most marginalized homeless community there is, Native Americans. Then it moves to a team that takes the 5 and moves it to 3. Ron Sims, African-American man who was county executive.
I have more questions, so I don't want to dwell on every member of the
I know, but
committee.
I think it's important for people to know.
But that doesn't change the fact that you have rank-and-file officers and you have community members who still aren't pleased.
Right, but
let me just make a point. In my 7 years covering policing in the city, there have been almost no things that rank-and-file officers and advocates of police reform have agreed on. That is an unusual thing to happen. And a lot of them have vocally agreed that they think Carmen Best would have been good for the job. And at the end of the day, wasn't that the point of a new police chief, is someone who the community trusts and someone who the police trust to bring us into the future? So we can talk all we want about the search committee and how wide-ranging it is. It doesn't change the backlash that there has been to this decision.
Right.
Right or wrong, it doesn't change the backlash.
Can I answer?
Yes.
So 2 things. First is I do want to finish because I think the public has a right to know who was making this recommendation from the 3 to the 5. And was there a race-based decision or an anti-gender? We had Bernie Malekian, who was President Obama's choice to run community policing for the country, who has run more searches. We had Ron Sims. We had Ian Warner, who is African-American, who was on the monitoring team, now serves as counsel, Shafali Raghunathan. So we had a very diverse group. And I will tell you, I understand there's disappointment, but I have heard from people on both sides saying they think the right decision was made.
And I have,
and this,
to be fair.
Right, to be fair. So
there's back and forth.
There's back and forth. So I think what we have to look at is, one, is the process sound?
Is it?
It is sound.
Okay.
And if I wanted as mayor to devise a system that would exclude Carmen Best or exclude outsiders, I would have said no internal candidates. And I had the right to do that. I didn't do that because I believe the Seattle Police Department, while it has challenges, is the best police department in the country, bar none. I believe in the rank and file. I have gone to roll calls. I work with them. This morning I talked with the ones on the navigation team. They have a really tough job. I have confidence in this police force and in Carmen Best. I chose her as to be my interim chief. I talked to her on Friday. I talked to her over the weekend. I asked her and want her to stay on as chief. I want her to stay in the department. I've known her for many, many years. So this is not a question about, you know, one member of the committee said it's because I thought we need to have someone from externally. For me, there's a whole range of factors. One of those is, how do we police in Seattle for the next 5 years? How do we do law enforcement in an urban environment so that we are handling protests, we're arresting people who commit crimes? Public safety is the #1 job of police, but how they do that public safety is very different. You know, looking back as when I was U.S. Attorney, I was able to work with every law enforcement officer and head of chief of police in the whole West Coast. I think we have the best police force there is. I think our rank and file, we have made huge cultural shifts, but there's a lot of work left to be done. So this is not a decision about, you know, inside or outside. There's a range of things. And look, it's tough. We're a top city in America. It's a really competitive process. You know, when I left being U.S. Attorney, I was under consideration to be Attorney General for the United States of America. I would have loved that job. I didn't get it. Someone else was chosen, a good friend of mine, Loretta Lynch. I supported her. I supported the president's right to choose. It's a tough process. I have faith in Carmen Best. She will continue to be my interim chief. I think we'll continue to make a difference. And for the people who are disappointed, I'm going to go meet and listen and talk to them because I think having unity is important. But this is not about any single candidate. I think it's about a process, and the process was a very good process that worked. People just need to understand how it works. And
I promised I'd get you out the door because you've got other meetings to go to, but I want to put a fine point on this. You know, there's this insider and outsider. And I would imagine that after all of the research they did, those top 5 candidates were all probably pretty qualified for the job. Is that a fair assessment? When you get to the top 5, you probably could do the job?
No, I asked, I was briefed by my co-chairs and read their memo, and I said, I want to make sure that any name you give me, because they weren't bound to 5, they decided to send 5.
Right.
But the charter requires me to choose from a competitive examination of 3 names.
So for people out there who are asking for a redo, let's just be blunt with them. Is a redo possible?
No. You know, it is very tough in a process because everyone's got a favorite candidate. But if you set up a process to work and it works how it's supposed to work, the fact that one particular candidate, no matter how loved they are, doesn't make it, you don't have a redo. I've had calls from people in Texas wondering why that person didn't make it, and shouldn't I look at him closer? So I think we have to really look at, that's why I spend time talking about the process. I think the public has to understand what we did, how we got there, and I will make the decision moving forward. I hope that one of these 3 names, you know, there's some chance that none of those names meet what I think we need as a police, and then we would start over.
Or they don't want the job after all the drama. Can you see that happening? They say, no, thank you.
You know, we've had that happen before. The last time there was a police search, people dropped out because they thought that there was too much Seattle process. But look, if you're applying at a job at this level, you better have thought of that up front.
Yeah.
And if you can't work with community and understand that decisions like this are very emotional for people. And I have deep respect for people like Harriet Walden, who has worked for decades in this city for police reform. I worked with her when I was U.S. Attorney. I know she comes from a place of deep caring, not just for Carmen Best, for the city. And I'm going to listen to her. And I know she's upset, and I'm going to listen. But at the end of the day, when you set up a process, you have to let it work.
Yeah, and it's hard when you have someone who's dedicated so much of their life to a city, is so well respected, and you have someone tell them, you're an insider, you've dedicated too much time to the city, so you can't have this.
And I want to be very clear.
That's the frustration.
That was the opinion of one person.
Tim Burgess, who answered my question that way.
But if you look at the memo they wrote, there was a range of issues they were looking at, that it wasn't just insider, outsider. Again, if I had wanted to close it to internal candidates, I could have. We had multiple people apply from within the department. Carmen Best made it to the top 5. She should be incredibly proud of that. She is a really good police officer. She is a great chief right now. She and I have been focused, you know, when we talked over the weekend, it wasn't about this. It was about how do we have better policing in some parts of our city who need better policing. We had a couple of shootings over the weekend. Were those indications that we need to have different crime enforcement strategies? She is working for public safety every day of her life. And
we'll wrap up here. I hope she stays. I hope she stays because she's a good cop. People have respect for her. I doubt that she will, but I do hope she stays. On the homeless note,
she has told me she would.
She says she will stay.
She's got to assess this. Look, she's got, she's an incredibly dynamic person.
Yeah.
I think, you know, she could be stolen from us, but she is committed to the city. She's committed to this department. She said she will stay. And she right now is focused, as she said, I don't want to focus on drama. I want to focus on public safety and serving the community.
That sounds like Carmen Best.
Yeah.
Mayor Jenny Durkan, we appreciate you being here. On the homeless front, we wish you well. Anything we can do in the press, I don't know what we can do. We want you to be successful. We want to fix the crisis. We do still want to hold you accountable. But I hope that this plan works. I hope we get people.
It's part of a plan, and I think the important thing I want people to know is we need everyone to say, for example, as we're citing these tiny home villages, to listen. And to listen from people in Ballard and Inner Bay and Whittier Heights where communities come together. And if we can do it better, we'll do it better. But we're all in this together. There's no solution without all of us.
All right, Mayor Jenny Durkan, thank you for being
much.
here, taking so much
you.
time, way more time than we had planned on, but we appreciate you talking about 2 critically important issues with us.
Thanks so much.